Damn, that's a pig. I'd have never found this thing. I'm very grateful, man. Thank you.
Searching for a deer with a tracking hound. Over the river and through the woods, across the field, this dog is good. Found a little blood and two wounds, tracking hound telling me this deer is dead. Over the river and through the woods, across the field, this dog is good. Found a little blood and two wounds, tracking hound telling me this deer is dead.
Thank you. This is why you call a dog.
Yeah.
Hello, friends, fans, and followers. Matt with Tales on Trails Deer Tracking, joined today for time number 5, I think, Dave. Time number 5, joined by Dave Madore from D&W Tracking out of the greater Albany, New York area. Dave, how are you, bud?
Good, Matt. Thanks. And by the way, I absolutely love the intro. Like, hands down.
Oh,
love it. Love it.
oh, thanks, man. Yeah, I tell you what. So that intro, I had a lot of fun with that. It's my son-in-law playing and singing the song. He's really a better musician than he gives himself credit for. We're not entirely done with it, but I says, dude, you got enough that I can make an intro video out of it.
It's awesome.
But,
I love it.
But we're gonna keep working on it. Yeah, I wrote it, so to speak, and he composed it and performed it. It's a lot of fun. I can't wait till we really get it wrapped up and I can put it out there as a complete complete song. But it's a lot of fun. Thank you for that. I'm going to let him know that because we had a ton of fun with that. I like it too. But Dave, yeah, I think 5. Let me see. You did our original. Then you were part of all 3 Trackers forums. This one, so it's 4. So this is 5.
I had some internet issues on one of the tracker forums, so 2.5.
What's that?
I had some internet issues on one of those tracker forums, so maybe only half of one of those forums. But yeah,
yeah, but you were there. I feel like there was another one, but I think that was it. I know we've talked a lot. We've talked about doing stuff. I was going to have you co-host one with me that I couldn't pull together, but doesn't mean we won't get something pulled together. But so what have you been up to, man?
I think like everybody else, just kind of, I think it's over the, hey, I'm glad it's done phase. And now I'm back into the, can't wait for it to start back up phase. That's the tracker life, I guess.
The cycle, the loop, the trackers continuum.
So we're, I got 2 younger kids, a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old, and they're into everything, like just crazy sports and all that good stuff. So once tracking season ends, like I try to get involved in that as much as possible. And we're coming to the tail end of a couple of those sports. So we're just breaking into spring here, into some good weather. And with a 7-year-old dog, I really don't do a lot of training anymore the same as I used to. I don't lay a lot of lines anymore. It's funny, like I work out of my house, and every day at lunchtime when I go to the fridge, the dog knows I'm going to get him a treat and I'm going to hide it somewhere in the house.
Oh,
and I make it pretty difficult sometimes, and he'll sit right down by the fridge and he knows not to leave until I tell him to find it. But I mean, I hide it in some pretty good places. Sometimes it takes him 10, 15 minutes. He's not tracking anything. He's just in the air and running from room to room until he gets close to it. But it's kind of funny that that's the type of training that we're doing at this point.
Well, it's keeping his mind busy. It's keeping his, he in essence, he's problem solving, trying to find it. It's funny you bring that up because, I've been doing ABTA stuff and those live streams with Kenny Mullins and stuff. And, that's one of the things, that's one of the topics that came up is somebody asked, maybe it was you, Dave. Was it you that said, what do you do with an older dog?
Yeah, I was trying to make myself feel better about only hiding treats at noon.
Yeah,
I was glad to hear Kenny say that he doesn't do a lot as well.
He doesn't do a lot, but you're not the only one. I mean, and I think that's true when there comes a point, when your dog reaches a certain point, I don't know if there's a ton of value added in terms of developing the dog anymore. but it is fun. For the dog likes it. It gets exercise, but mental work. But so it's common. I know several people who the off season don't do any. Well, when one of our trackers for him, Jeremiah Gracie, said that he doesn't do any. He's got Trapper outside all the time with him doing all kinds of outdoor, trapping and whatever he's doing, but he doesn't train, and they're successful.
And I let him do dog stuff. My dog's, I think, a little different for a wired-haired dachshund. Like, I don't know how many people allow their dog to just roam free as a wired hair, right? Like, 'cause they can get on a rabbit and be gone pretty quick,
Oh yeah.
We put a lot of time into obedience early on. We've got 6 or 7 acres, but we're right up against the main road. Our neighbors are great. They leave a little tree.
Yeah.
So he's allowed to go back and forth there, but he's literally
boy.
doorbell in the morning to go outside. And sometimes he's out there 2 minutes and sometimes he's out there 50 minutes. And I have no idea what he's doing during that time unless he runs by one of the doorbells and he'll come back.
He's out there having the time of his life. That's what he's doing.
He's doing dog stuff, 90% of the time he's doing dog stuff, figuring out what rabbit went where. And, there's a couple of that come through the backyard. And, every day I see him go by the trail camera at some point in time. Like he went there to check out something, but yeah, we just let him do dog stuff during that time of year. And then as the weather starts to break here, my kids are outside on 4-wheelers and golf cart, whatever, that's back to chasing mode, right? Like he gets to chase around and tire himself out and get a little bit of that winter 2 pounds that he puts on after tracking, where he just
2 pounds is a lot for a little dog.
It is.
Yeah. How old do you say he is now? Did you say 7?
Yeah, he was 7 this year. We just did our 7th. God, I always have to do this math in my head, but we just finished our 7th season, and his birthday is on October 1st, which is the start of our season. So
I remember you saying that before. Yeah, that's cool. We've been working, just started, the snow. I don't know when the snow left you, but the snow just left us couple weeks ago. So we're just now getting out and doing stuff, and I'm working with some other local friend. Maybe you saw, first year reflection with Frank and Nick.
Yep.
And then I have another friend, Alan, who close to me, who wrapped up as well. So, they're going to be coming down or coming to my place this weekend. Whoever can make it, we got to wrap that up, and I'm going to lay some lines for them. And my friend Daryl's coming down this weekend, and we're going to, help him prepare for his ABTA. We're going together. We're both going to go to the Northern Ohio to Joe Tenney place, and we're gonna test down there. Daryl's gonna run his started level and seasoned level, which is they're 1 and 2 if you're gonna equate it to UBT, at least in terms of level. And then Daryl wants to run Oakley, his 11-year-old coonhound, who's obviously in the twilight of her career. He wants to get her on the ABTA finish level test and then ultimately do the elite test, which is going to be debuted at the Iowa event in April. And I've been on some of the meetings and conversations about, putting the final touches on that. Let me tell you something, brother. If you pass that elite test, you are a bad mojo. It's really fun. Elite is the right word for it. It's the level 4, if you will, and it is laden with very real scenarios that you can run in tracks. And I'm just going to leave it at that.
But I've been listening to a lot of the stuff you've been doing with Kenny Mullins on the ABT stuff, and I've never tested. I've never done UBT1, UBT2. To be honest with you, my dog isn't even AKC. Like when I bought him, we fixed him shortly afterwards, and it's another $100 to put papers on him that I'll never use because we'll never breed him, right?
Yeah.
So I've never done any of that, and there's certainly reason for it, and some states it requires it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But to hear Kenny get into like, hey, I thought there should be more than just 1 and 2, right? And then 3, like him going through the progressions, it's like, yeah, that's really training a dog, right? Like there is
Yeah.
a big jump between 1 and 2. Could a 1 do a 2 right away? Sure. But some of that hunter interview and having gaps and talking about trespassing, like that's not just testing the dog, that's testing handlers as well. Like I
Yeah.
find it really interesting.
No, it really is. It's a lot of fun, and you mentioned it's not about training. The testing. It's about getting your dog out and running your dog and having fun and working with it. And a lot of networks like the one I'm in here in Michigan, you're required to have at least a level 1 certification, which I think is a good thing. I think networks and I think states should require. I think it would be good if they required at least a level 1 or a started level certification. And it doesn't mean, like I said a bazillion times on live streams and podcasts, it doesn't mean that your dog is going to find any more or less deer because you have ribbons like mine hanging behind me here. But it does validate that your dog understands its job. It understands, and it does show that it does have the ability to follow a scent line. It does do that, so it's some version of a credential, and I think it's great.
And it's valuable to the public, right? Like,
Yeah.
especially with some of you Western states that are just getting it, the Iowas and Illinois, that Missouri,
Yeah.
like just a couple of years into it, right? You get this flood of people interested and you can charge on top of it, right? So some people
Yeah.
might not be in it for the exact right reasons or be saying that
Yeah.
they've got something that they don't have. I love how, these individual states have rallied around making their own group to protect hunters, right? And first tracking, you can't charge, right? Like it's really about hunters. Like,
Yeah.
I say that I absolutely love tracking. I can't
Me
imagine
too.
my life without tracking. But a
Me
big
neither.
part of it is, helping hunters, right? Like being in the mix with hunters and being there for that, that time that they need help, and then ultimately being able to help them. Like that drives a lot of it. But
it's absolutely a motivator. It's the word I use is a fulfillment. Here we go again, listeners. I am so sorry. When I was coaching, it was a massive fulfillment for me. It was very fulfilling for many of the same reasons tracking is now. And when I retired, I'm like, what the hell? It was a huge vacuum that I didn't expect it to be that big, and then tracking swooped right in and filled it right up, and now I'm continuing to progress and expand my involvement in the tracking community, making wonderful friends, and it's a fulfillment. I mean, one of the I had it on my Facebook page for a while with the permission of the hunter. My October 2nd track this year, I found his 168-inch deer and recorded him approaching it and seeing it and discovering that I was pulling his leg when I said I found blood, and with his permission, I posted it. But it was expletive.
Yeah.
Oh my, it was just a wonderful, wonderful moment. In fact, he's on the intro, the voiceover. Man, that's a pig. That was Dan. He called me. He's okay. Everybody seen it. You might take it down. I'm kind of embarrassed, and I'm a business owner, and I'm like, no problem, buddy.
Right.
But I still have that video because it is one of the most precious moments that I've had so far, or at least that I've been able to capture on video. It's why you do it, man. It was just great. The guy worked his tail off on his property, just pours his heart and soul into it, and had this great big deer. He was sunk, and we thought we were done because Baru kept going on a goose chase. I says, man, we got to try it again. I'm not convinced. And then third time she found it, so he's lifted back. It was just everything about it was awesome. So that's why we do it, man.
Absolutely. 100%.
That's why we do it. How many did you get on this year?
So we did 74 calls this year. I did write down some stats. So I took 152 people called, which was almost exactly to the number almost exactly to the number of last year, believe it or not. Like I try to keep track. I'm sure I'm off a little
Yeah.
bit, like in the truck here and
Yeah.
there, but I try to remember at the end of the day, and I keep a little spreadsheet. But I think it was almost exactly the same amount last year that called. And I try to talk to everybody, get back to them, text, at least talk to them. Other trackers, pretty good network here. We don't have a ton of trackers. We have 3 or 4 guys that are pretty, when I say close, 30, 40 miles apart from each other
Yeah.
on this team.
Yep.
But between us, all willing to drive an hour or so,
Yeah.
you can get out there pretty good and cover it. So 152 calls. I took 74 tracks, which again, every year it's gone up. I think last year was 65. So,
Yeah, that's getting out there, buddy.
yeah, I was really, at some point, I know I'm going to need to start another dog. Really hoping not to have to rely on a 1 or 2 year old dog ever again, but it's like, where is that mix with, especially with a wired hair, right? Like I know guys out in Western New York tracking with a 14-year-old wired hair and did almost 100 tracks this year, so it's like, where do you start that? And with Winston had gotten pretty sick last year with anaplasmosis.
Yeah, I remember that.
It was down and out. So I really wanted to push hard this year. Both him and I'm getting up there as well. So I pushed a little bit harder this year. My goal was 75. We got to 74.
Slacker.
Yeah. Believe me, I was dying for that last call. And then we got some snow that stuck around. Came a little earlier than previous years. And once that snow hit and stuck around, the calls kind of came off. But
oh yeah, for sure. I want to pull something up here because you talked about you're getting older, whatever, man. I want to hear it, but hold on a second. I want to be very accurate with this tracking. Here we go. Nope, that's not the right one. Bear with me. Gosh dang it. Checking data. Why am I not finding? Anyway, I wanted to see exactly how many numbers this tracker went on. How many tracks this tracker went on. But you talk about age. This wonderful man in our tracking network here in Michigan, just a great guy. He's like 82 years old and went on a bazillion tracks this year and found just under a bazillion deer. And with his little Dotson, cherry pie. Rick Martin, many people will know him. He's just a great guy, and just grinding it out, man.
To look him up, a guy that kind of mentored me through a lot of this. Like I've never actually met him face to face, but Bob Yaks, he's out in Western part of New York. He's got a dog, Thor, that came from John and Joanna Genene. So, came from the place the book was written. Him and Thor, I think that he posted a stat this year. I think they finished their 1100th track as a team. Like they're 13. They've been together for like 13 seasons, I think. And they've got just over 1,100 tracks. And I think I think Bob is in his early 70s and probably did. He did more tracks than I did. He did between 75 and 100 tracks again this year with a 13-year-old dog.
Yeah,
and he's got another dog in training. He's not quitting. He's got Iris that he brings on every track that Thor goes on.
Yeah.
Iris follows right behind, and that's how they're training him.
I got it here. Why can't I find his? Oh, there he is, way up here. He reported early. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Rick went on 80 tracks.
That's. I mean, I felt it. I felt 74 for sure. Like I was.
I felt 86 as an out of shape fat man.
They do
at
bust
Christmas
Bob's
tree.
chops a little bit. He's in Western New York. It's a little flatter out there. It's wine country out
Oh
by the Finger
well,
Lakes.
yeah,
So I'm like, you come out here into the Adirondack. We're right at the base of the Adirondacks. And we start to get some elevation. And I'm like, yeah, anybody can do 84 tracks and flatland out there, But
that's funny. That's funny, but that's still grinding, though, man, and that's awesome. That's what I
yeah,
love about it, man. You get soup to nuts from people doing it, man, and that's awesome. So it's funny you bring up another dog and pondering that, because I was going to ask you about that with Winston at 7 now. Yeah, maybe he's only halfway home, maybe but for me with a bloodhound at 7, yeah, I probably need to have my second dog well underway.
yeah.
Uh,
That's really why I'm leaning toward another word here. Like
yeah,
we talked about this a little bit. Like I'm not a
yeah,
little dog guy. Like I had a Weimaraner. That Weimaraner was my one dog that you get in life. Like that dog went
yeah.
everywhere with me, and
I remember
he
that.
lived to
Yeah,
about 14. And I mean, now that I know air quotes what I'm doing with training a dog,
yeah,
I
yeah, yeah,
certainly
yeah,
don't know it, right? But more than I did before, I could see
yeah.
myself like loving having another Weimaraner in the house, right? But I know what that would mean as far as trying to train a bird dog to go track, right? Could he do
Yeah,
it? For
we can
sure,
do. Yeah,
for sure, right? But I mean, I'm so Winston, and I think most wire-hairs are this way. And I think Kenny Mullins actually talked about it a little bit and some of the stuff that you guys were talking about, like just super easy to read, right? Like it's
yeah,
so nice for me to
yeah,
be able to start at the tailgate and go to the hunter. Look, this is what's going to happen. We're either going to find
yeah,
your deer dead. We're not going to find much sign at all. And we're going to stop at 300, 400 yards. And the dog's going to look like a bird dog. He's going to start bouncing around looking for
yep,
that scent again.
yep,
Or if he makes a noise and starts barking or whining, there's either a dead deer super close and I'm not going fast enough to let him get there, or your deer's up and alive and he's only out in front of us by a couple minutes.
yep,
And being able to set that stage at the tailgate, it just drives so much more. I don't want to say respect, but belief out of hunters, especially hunters who've never seen it before, right? Like
yeah,
when they start to hear him bark, I can say your deer's alive and he's running, right? If I didn't tell them that at the tailgate and I just told them that out in the woods, they'd be like, "Nah, this guy just doesn't want to run any farther," right? Like we still
yeah,
got blood. Like why aren't we going?
yeah. That's right, and it makes it easier to call the track.
Yeah,
When you have to, because it doesn't, you're not trying to, okay, I know we're not going to get this deer, but I need to at least make this guy think that I'm trying for him. But if you set that stage early on, just what you said, now you can turn around to him. So remember what we talked about? So this, yeah, oh yeah, you think it's alive? Yep, it's alive.
so another breed, I don't know that I would. It'd take me a while to learn those tells, right? Like this wired hair, he's just it's that easy, right? It's if he barks, it's alive.
Yeah.
It's a pretty
And
easy tell.
even within the breed, you'll find individualism and the nuances. But I'm very similar in the sense that you know tracking to me is bloodhound, is big dog, because that's imprinted for me, because that my very first exposure to deer tracking was first the German Shepherd. My logo, that's an homage to Demi, the one that got me into tracking, and then I brought into bloodhound when I got Brew. But it's big dog, so that's what it is to me. Zero discredit to the smaller dogs, because just like we talked about, they are the most driven little snots I have ever freaking seen, and just deer finding machines. But it's just weird for me because I'm used to these big things that go like this, and just what you said, I'm accustomed to reading bloodhound demeanor.
Sure.
And again, they're different individually, but there are some commonalities amongst breeds, and another reason that I would lean towards, a hound as opposed to a bird dog, a feather dog converted to a fur dog,
Yep.
is I know me, and I don't need something else to overcome. You know what I mean? I don't. It's hard enough for me to to get the fur dog to stay on, to do what they're supposed to do. And I shouldn't say hard enough, but I don't want to have to overcome the
More doubt.
tendencies of a
More
bird
doubt, right?
dog. Yeah, yeah.
It's just more
So
doubt in our minds that you
yeah,
start doubting another. You've learned all this. Why throw it
yeah,
away?
yeah. And now again, there's GSPs, there's Wymies, there's all kinds of traditional bird dogs out there finding bazillions of deer, and that's awesome. But
I think I would probably cheat if I went away from a wired hair. I would cheat and probably go to a silver lab, which it's got that look of a Weimaraner, but it's not a Weimaraner. It's still
yeah.
I would probably cheat and go silver lab, and I know the labs are. They just want to work for you. It's different than my wired hair. My wired hair can care less if I'm happy or sad or upset. He wants to go chase deer, right? Where a lab, I think, would be fairly easy to train because they want to, with positive.
Yeah, they're people pleasers for sure. And that's funny you say that too, because I run a practice line this past weekend with Baru, and I had my friend Dylan down with his bloodhound. He Zerk's just one, laid a line for him, and then he followed along when Baru ran his, and he brought Zerk, had him on the leash, and I'm like, oh, this will be interesting to see how this goes. I wonder how Baru's going to handle it with another dog. She does not care one bit. She don't care about she'll head check me once in a while. Just okay, where's dad or whatever, but she don't care. She didn't give a crap about Zerk. She come back to the circle by him, never paid him one bit of attention. So she's not trying to please me. She's just trying to do what she's bred to do and find the thing that she's trying to find, and loves every minute of it. And then when she gets there, she don't care. She did the thing, she followed and she worked it out. But I like that. I like that in independence and not caring about me and not really caring about the hunter or any other real distractions. There's something.
It makes it easy, right? It makes it easy. If I'm in a bad mood, my dog don't care, right?
Yeah.
If I'm angry at something, my dog don't care. If a hunter's out there screaming his head off at something, or get frustrated because we were supposed to meet him at 7 and he's not there. Some things like that happen. The dog, he doesn't care. He's set me down, get me just let me go.
Get it together, Pop, because I'm here to work. I don't care what you feel about it. Yeah,
it does make it feel easy.
I would consider like a coonhound. My friend Daryl, I kind of mentioned him. He's not coonhound. I mean, it's coonhound, but a red bone. I don't think I would like a dog that's constantly open on the track. I just personally wouldn't like that. It would drive me crazy.
Especially off lead, I think they would be open constantly, right?
Yeah. If that's their nature. But I'd consider that. I consider coonhound. I don't know. I consider a Catahoula. Yeah. I'm really intrigued by Catahoulas. But I would do a whole bunch of consulting before I went that route. Yeah. But, at some point I'm going to quit pretending like I'm considering other dogs and just concede that it's going to be a bloodhound.
Yeah.
Because it probably
I could see us getting another wired haired for tracking, and as my kids get old enough, and I could see us having 2 dogs at a clip, if Winston passed, and, we've got a tracking dog. I could see us going and getting a second dog that's a house dog. That's cool, man. That's cool. So 74 track. I started to keep track of calls so that I'm going to try to. I gave that up pretty quick. Yeah.
Calls, tracks, I'm like,
I do some guessing at it for sure. Some days I sit down, I'm like, man, I didn't write it down for the last 3 days. And I'm like, okay, it feels like
going back through. And what I get, they called. And maybe I couldn't get to it because I was on the track, whatever. And then they text. So then I respond to the text. Okay, did I get that call? Oh, wait, that's the same number. It's everybody knows it gets hard to manage.
Yeah.
Around Halloween for the next 2 weeks,
And as you do it more and more, right, you start to get the same people calling, like not badly the same people, but they already have your number, right? So
Yeah.
they're calling directly. And I've started a little system where I put everybody's first and last name in the name, and then I put the town that they're in their second name. And if we found a deer for them, I always snap a picture of them with the deer, and that's their profile picture.
That's a great idea, Dave.
So when they call me the second year, it comes up like, oh yeah, I remember that deer. Like sometimes you just meet people out, and it's like, hey Dave, remember? And I'm like, I think I've done 400 and some tracks at this point, right? And I would love to say I remember every deer and every person, but I don't. But having that, when it pops up, you're like, oh yeah, I remember that guy. Super good guy, right? Like he was right. It's pretty easy to answer the phone and get on a conversation.
That's a great idea. I'm going to start doing that, and I may go back because I do something similar. I save them in my phone, and then I parenthetically state them as clients just so I know how I know them. I don't consider the people I track for clients, but I want to be able to distinguish them some way. But that is a great idea to put the picture of them with the deer, assuming you recover their deer. Put it. I'm going to start doing that.
Yeah, and I put like track number. So, like I said, I put their name, and then I'll put. So if it's track 5 of the year, 05-25, and then I'll put the town after it. And I do that because whatever, I can always go back to that track on my spreadsheet that I keep year in, year out.
Yeah.
A little commentary, and I can be like, oh yeah. I remember why we didn't find that deer or how we found it or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's
that's cool. I like talking about those little things, how people do that stuff. I got something from it. I'm going to do it. I use Google Forms to record my tracks.
Yep.
And because for me, it's got to be quick and easy. If and I don't really put any comments because I know I'm not going to do it consistently, but I open it up and the only thing I have to type is the hunter's name, and everything else is a click. The hunter's name, recovery, yes, no, what do you hunt, and just click it, and then of course that exports to Excel, and I keep all of that. But and then you just keep that running. You can know at any instant how many tracks you've done, how many recoveries you have. You can figure out your percentage if that's what you like to do at any time, and then maybe later. If there's something particularly special about it, I might go into that spreadsheet and make a note. Oh, hunter's first buck or something like that, But I don't keep intricate details. But I like to do
2 or 3 sentences about, especially if it's a number. If there's something crazy, it's usually 2 or 3 sentences in the column. Just it gives me something to do
memory, right?
Yeah, it's a memory.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. So tell me about some of your tracks, man. What
we had an interesting year. Lots of bears this year. I say lots of bears. We covered 4 bear in 6 days. I think maybe we had 5 calls in 6 days. Like it was just a certain time of the year. They were just out and prevalent. And I think some of it was crossbow coming in. So here in New York, October 1st is our bow season for big game. And if a bear happens to come by, you could shoot a bear, right? And it used to be when I grew up, if somebody said they saw a bear, you're like, yep, and the Loch Ness Monster's real. And
let me guess, the bear was riding Bigfoot, right?
Yeah. So in the 90s, like a bear was a really big deal. I grew up in the Catskill Mountains. Like there should be bear there, but we just never saw them. Yeah. And now they're definitely becoming more prevalent. We don't really have. We have a early bear season the last 2 weeks of September that you can just hunt bear in certain small regions. In these Catskill region, it's a mountain range here, small. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But most people that grew up here are deer hunters. So if they happen to have a bear walk by during deer season, they have a tag for it. And that's how most bear get taken here. They're not out hunting bear, it just happens that they come through. So in almost all of those scenarios, that's exactly what it was. People out deer hunting and a bear came through and they happened to shoot it. But yeah, that week was just super. A bear used to be like it got you out of bed and you'd go do it, right? Like really fun to track. The dog just absolutely loves them and nails every one of them just because
I hear they're easy to track. I hear they're easy for dogs.
They are for us. We don't have a lot of bear. I would think like maybe up in Maine when they got spring bear season on and you're putting a dog down at a bait pile where bear come in every day or something, it might be a little more difficult. But here we don't have a lot of bear. So the ones that we do have, they smell, right? They just smell awfully bad, And some of the stuff that Kenny brought up and the stuff that you guys were talking about, like their pads secreting that same pheromone, right? I didn't really put those two together, right? I always just assumed it's stress, right? There's a hole in it. There's blood out there somewheres and they stink. So the dog he's always nailed everyone. The one thing here though, if there is a bear that's been shot and he can get to a swamp, he's going to get to a swamp. Like every bear that we've ever tracked goes into a nasty blowdown or a wet marshy area. Anywheres that they can get to mud and muck, they're going to go. If they can get there, that's where they'll go.
I've never been around a bear, never tracked bear, never. But I've heard that the bear country is the nastiest, gnarliest. They go into the most god awful garbage you can imagine. I've heard that. So that's it does not sound fun to me.
And a couple of them that we found this year get down into these swamps and little 27-pound wire-haired dachshund, and it's so thick in there that he's standing up on his back legs trying to use his eyes because the cloud of scent is at this point because it's laid there for 12 hours and it's just so brushy that he can't get through some of it and drag the lead. And I'm fighting like I ain't going through there. So he'll get up on his hind legs, and usually another really good tell, right? It's the second he stands up on his hind legs, I turn to the hunter, I go, your bear is here. Like it's here. We just have to locate it at this point, right? And once he starts using his eyes instead of his nose, I know we're super close. But
you ever come up on a live bear? Well, wait a minute. Yes, you have, and we're going to get into that story in some detail in a little bit. But
yeah, that one was definitely interesting. I'll give you a couple of deer stories before we get into that.
Yeah, I want to say that one for last because that was you called me on that one and say, "Hey, man," but
that one was crazy.
Yeah,
that one was crazy. I'll say we definitely had a mix, right? Like I wrote down a couple things, like emotionally wise, like the one that I wanted, deer wise, I wanted to find the most. I had this guy, a repeat customer. I think I've tracked for him twice before. Both times didn't find a deer. Super, super nice guy, young kids, say in his 30s. And you get out of the truck, he's a yes, sir, no, sir guy, just as polite as you can, right?
Yeah.
He called and shot a good buck in the morning, super early. And I'm like, okay, let's give him some time. We'll come out there. He knew it. He thought that he hit it high, but he just wanted to do everything he could. And he calls back. God, I'm trying to remember now if he called me back or he had to go like while we were on the call, but we had already set up that we're going to meet later. And long story short, it turns out that his parents were in Florida for the winter and their house got broken into and his mother was actually murdered during this home invasion. Yeah.
Oh no.
Right. Like, so here I am texting him like, hey, you still want to meet to go find this deer, right?
Oh no.
And he's the politest kid in the world. He's like, hey, I'll give you a call in a little bit, right? And I'm like, okay, like what's going on? Am I going to go on a different track or am I going to take this track? Like, he's been good to me before. I want to make sure I do it, and he finally calls me and he tells me this story. And I'm like, dude, like this deer is not important at this point, right? Like, God almighty, like how can I help out, And he had some family in the area and they had already booked flights to go. And he's just like, dude, I have to get out of my house for a little bit. He's like, do you mind coming out tonight? And I'm like, you tell me what time you want to be there. I don't care if it's midnight, 1 o'clock, what do you want to do? He's like, and I'm like, okay. So I meet him and his brother at like 11 o'clock at night. And I never wanted to find a deer so bad in my life.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I was just like, God, it just tore me up, and ultimately I had them stay at Last Blood and went down this huge ravine. I mean, as steep as it can be, down to the bottom, the other side, and we don't see anything all the way. I don't see any tracks across it.
Yeah.
Come across the other side and come up the other side and right to a posted sign. And as we get to the posted sign, Winston opens up and starts barking. And I'm already holding him back because of the posted sign. I'm trying to get service, whatever. And I kind of yank him back. And I'm like, man, we've already gone a mile at this point. And I'm like, I got to haul all the way back up out of there. I'm like, so I call him. I'm like, I'm coming back to you. Like, it took me, I bet it took me 35, 40 minutes to haul myself up out of this cliff and get back to where I knew where I was and met them in the field. And I'm like, look, I may have missed something along the way. We get to the property and he's like, yeah, that property is actually part of this property as well. You could have kept going. I'm like, okay. I was like, why don't you guys come with me this time? Just see if you can see something different. And I was like, we'll see if the dog hits the same track. We go to the same track and up the bank again. And right where he got hot, he goes in a little ways and there's a bed, a definitely distinct bed, but I couldn't find anything in it. And he wanted to go. So I wasn't going to hold him back. And he cuts left and starts heading up the stream. And again, I don't see anything and get into the riverbank. And also the brother from behind yells, there's blood here. And I'm like, what? And he's like, blood back here. So I haul it back the 100 yards. And I mean, the smallest speck of blood, just a size of a pea on a leaf.
Yeah.
And I pull out hydrogen peroxide and sprayed it and it lit right up. It was blood. Right. And I mean, I was so happy to see that. I know we're not going to find this deer at this point. Yeah. But I could turn to Mike and be like, hey, man, like, yeah, he's fine, right? Like, you're not leaving him out here to rot. Like, he's alive. Like, we jumped him down here. The dog went hot. And, you know, it was a pretty crappy day for him, but it just getting him outside. And I went home, like, I really wanted that deer. I didn't care if it was a spike horn or what it was.
Oh, I know, man.
That one ripped my heart out not to be able to put on the tailgate, but that was one of the lower sides of it.
But you still helped him. You still helped him by letting him get out of the house and get his mind on something besides one of the worst day of his life.
Yeah,
you know,
we've become even closer friends. You know, I still follow him on Facebook. His boy is the same age as my boy. They play in different schools at football and stuff. So, you know, we're kind of ribbing each other about when we're going to play each other and stuff.
Oh,
so it brought us even a little bit closer. So I didn't mean to bring us down, but that
no, man. I think it was a great story.
Yeah, I would say, you know, so that's the low side of it. The one that I have that, like, impressive wise, wasn't that long of a track. But, you know, after 7 years, he certainly, every year he does something that just still blows my mind. This year, guy had called me, again, another guy had found a deer for him 4 or 5 years ago when we first started out. He was hunting a piece of public land. His son actually was, and shot a deer in the morning. Couldn't find the arrow. But son knew he hit him back. Immediately said I'd hit him back bad. Like, I hit him back, can't find the arrow, but it's definitely back. They call me. I'm like, dude, you guys, it's 2 miles from my house. I'm like, let him be. You know, you shot him at 6 a.m. We'll go find him just before dark. Like, we'll go out there with some light still available, 4:30 or so. You know, it's been 10 hours, and let's see what we can do. He's like, well, my son can't be here. He's going to be in college. Okay, well, if you're willing to go, just us, let's go. So we go down there, and it's the Hudson River. It runs from New York City all the way up, you know, to Canada, basically, right? I live 2 miles from there, and he's hunting right on the edge of the Hudson River. I mean, from the tree stand where he shot it, it's 150 yards into the water. And it's public land that was bought up by a conservatory, and they don't do a lot of maintenance with it, right? There's no forestry program, so it's underbrush, just never been logged, downfalls, it's thick. So we start the dog, and we get, you know, maybe 250 yards into it. We see a little bit of blood and see what I think is the track, and we go another 200 yards, and he's excited, like he's acting like he's on a fairly fresh track, even though it's 10 hours, which is still pretty fresh. And we cross this little muddy path, and I don't see any foot tracks in it. I'm like, if a deer would have crossed here, it was soft enough, you'd see the hoof, right?
Yeah.
And then he gets us into this set of briar patches that I'm stuck in. Like, I can't get out of it. I can't even see the dog. He's buried underneath there. And, so here comes the frustration, right? And I'm yanking him out from underneath there. I'm like, get out of there. And I pick him up and I haul him back to the hunter. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. Like he got into this patch. I'd hate to think that there was a rabbit or something in there, but I don't know what he was doing. So we restart him, and then he does this basically the same loop. But this time when he gets to the briar patch, he goes a little bit farther right in this muddy section, and I do see a set of hoof tracks now. And it's a decent deer. It's a decent deer, right? You can see his hocks in the back. And I'm like, this has got to be it, right?
Yeah.
And he was just off just that little bit, and then deer walked beside that brush, and he was trying to take the shortcut through the middle of the brush. Well, now that we get to, I call it a seawall. It's just a concrete retainer at the river, because tugboats come up. There's part of the river right there's like 70 foot deep, so these retaining walls keep the banks from eroding into the bank, basically. And it's old concrete, and the dog gets there, and it's knee high for me, right? And he wants to get up on the retaining wall, and I'm like, what are you doing? You think this deer swam the river? I mean, the river is half a mile wide, maybe 3/4 of a mile wide right there. Oh my God, if he went into that river, we're done. Like it's moving fast enough. There's no way. So I pick him up, I get him over the wall, and I set him on the stubble, the hard rocks on the other side, and he's smelling around, and he wants to come back up on the seawall. And I'm like, okay. So this time I set him on the seawall, and he's walking down the seawall. We go, I'm going to say we went 125 yards, maybe 150 yards. And I'm like, what are you doing, dog? Right? Like maybe the wind's just blowing right, and he's up higher and he's not having to go through those briar patches. And at the 125 yard mark, there is a quarter-size spot of blood on that seawall.
On that
seawall is not any wider than my shoulders, 2.5 feet. And that deer had gotten on the wall and walked it himself.
What the hell?
We found that drop. We find 2-3 drops, right? And then off the seawall and into another patch of like huge briars. And he's in there again. And it's so thick, I can't even get into it. I'm like, what are you doing, dog? And I'm like yanking him out of there. I'm like, we spent a couple minutes there, and I'm pulling on him, and he finally just sits down and looks at me like, you're going to have to throw me in the river if you want me to go anywhere. But he was done dealing with my shit, basically.
Yeah.
Finally, like, all right, let's go. And the time I said that, he just turns and bolts back into that brush. And I got down on my hands and knees and looked under there, and 150-inch deer laying in there, head up, just looking at me. And I'm like,
oh my gosh, alive.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh my God, what's out of there. I'm yanking him out and pull him back to me. And I back up, and the hunter's 400 yards back. Like, he never got on the seawall. I just told him to stay there.
Yeah.
I come back to him, and I'm like, we've got some stuff to figure out here. And I had a gun, but it was back at the truck. I just didn't bring it with me because it was public land during Moosey. I just was nervous about being around houses and stuff. It's completely legal here. We have the ability to dispatch day or night in New York State. I can dispatch anytime.
Okay. Yeah.
So I just didn't bring it down in there because of where the location was. So I'm like, man, we're going to have to dispatch. And I hadn't even told him that I'd found the deer yet. And I was like, I kind of playing along, like, I've got something to show you. Like, we found his bed from this morning. I go, but you're not going to believe how he got there. And we're walking the seawall, and I show him the blood, and he's just like, no way. And he's like, where's the bed? I'm like, underneath that brush, just be careful, right? Like, because you can't get in there. Just kneel down here and look. And he kneels down and he looks. He goes, oh my God, he's in there and he's dead. And I'm like, you sure he's dead? He's not looking at you. And I get back down and look, and he's bundled up. He had tried to get out of there when we got through there, and that was his last hurrah, and got torn up in those briars. But yeah, just impressive to see the dog get up. Impressive for the deer to walk on a concrete wall that is 200 feet wide for 100 yards, right? Because it was just the easiest path for him to walk down through there. I don't know if he wanted to go to the water and he just decided he didn't want to physically get in the water, but there was so much brush. I think it was just the easiest way for him to navigate to where he wanted to go lay down. And that watching
where was he hit? Where was he hit?
Almost dead center liver. Almost dead center liver. It was back liver gut. He was angled a little bit more than what he had thought he was.
That's common. Yeah.
Yeah, small fixed blade, made a small hole, but it was. I'm going to say it was pushing the 10-hour mark when we found him. So
What time of year was
5.5-year-old deer.
What time of
What's that?
year?
Late October, not quite November
Okay.
yet, I guess. Yep, it was right about there, and it was nice to be down in there because there was some moisture down there. We had as dry a season as I've ever seen. Like not just tracking, just dry.
Yeah.
I think we had 4 days of actual precipitation from October 1st to November 15th. And the total between October or all of September and all of October was less than 2.5 inches of moisture. Like it was, we were running into, and I do a lot of, we talked about this earlier. Most of my tracks are during the day. And boy, if you got out there after 10 o'clock in the morning, after what little dew there was or coolness there was, like we were struggling, especially in pine needles or crunchy leaves. Like it's amazing. Like with all of that we know of, we didn't leave a deer in the woods. And this is the first year in 7 years that we didn't leave one in the woods. And I'll say the last 4 that we left in the woods were 100% my fault. We were close and I pulled them off. The dog was right. This year we almost left one. We jumped a deer at night. I was confident that he was going to be okay. I thought he was going to be okay. And there was piles of coyotes screaming their head off, like super close. And I was like, man, if we just keep going, the coyotes are going to have them anyways. Maybe they already do. I wasn't sure, but we literally hit a main road. And I just told the guy, I'm like, look, I don't think this deer is going to die. I said, but let's tie up a ribbon. You can come back here tomorrow. My guess is he went over that bank through those neighbors. You're going to have to knock on their door. And the next day at 10 o'clock, he's texting me, found him. And he, right where we had left off, that deer, once we got off of him, went down into maybe 200 yards down a bank and into a small creek down there and laid down where it was cool. And coyotes had never got to him or nothing. But that was the only one that, that when we left, ultimately ended up being dead that we heard of. I'm sure of the, some mysteries out there. There's certainly.
No, yeah. Well, that ain't all bad, man.
Yeah. So that was that was impressive to me. I don't think it was hard work for Winston, but at the same time, like it's, when you tell stories, right? It's like that deer walked seawall like that for 125 yards or 150 yards or whatever. But
that's sorry, buddy.
No worries.
That seawall is freaking interesting, man. What a great that makes for a great story. And that's not one of the tracks you recorded to put on YouTube, probably.
No, I actually got the father's reaction with my phone when he actually looked down into the brush and saw it. He bear hugged me and about knocked me into the brush too. And then we called his son, who was in college taking like a midterm or some exam that he couldn't get out of. We called him and told him that we found him and sent some pictures, and he's screaming through the phone. And it was us, it was a really, really good deer. I mean, he was high 140s, probably, close to 150.
Yeah, that's a great deer, man.
Here, that's a giant like that. You don't get to see many of them like that here. So everybody was ecstatic. And I think they actually ended up, there's 2 boat accesses for launches. They ended up parking a car at the bottom launch after they dropped the canoe off at the top launch. Drove another car up and got in the canoe and floated down and had them and strapped them into the canoe and floated down to the other car, as opposed to trying to drag them all the way back up to the car, which was a considerable way. So they got a pretty cool experience out of it as well. So that was a fun one for sure.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome.
So I'll give you my second best bear one. You kind of know the bear one, but this one that we did not find this year, a bear. Kid calls me. I tracked for him once before too, and he says, I'm hunting behind a commercial set of building. It's a huge piece of property. It's actually a well-known Division I Ivy League school around us that owns a big chunk of this property, right? And people use it to walk in, hike in, and there's people that hunt it. It doesn't say that you can't hunt it, right?
Yep.
It's bow only in there. And what he does is he gets dropped off at one end and he walks through it and just still hunts it with a bow. And
Okay.
he's grown
Yeah.
up doing it. And he was about to the other end, and his brother, I think, was going to pick him up or something. And he steps on this log, and he hears and here's a bear underneath this blowdown, got him stared down from like
Oh my
10
God.
yards. And he doesn't have an arrow nock or nothing. So he backs up and puts an arrow in. And by the time that happens, the bear comes out and kind of coming out of the hole, and he shoots him. The bear goes up the bank and into the parking lot where he's supposed to meet his brother. And
Oh my God.
there's a husband and wife walking their dog and see the bear. And the hunter says that he can just hear them say, "Oh my God, a bear." And he's shot. And then the bear turned, must be, and went down the edge of the parking lot and dumped back into the woods. And I only know that because when we got there to track him, that's exactly what the dog did. He made this
Oh
big
yeah.
loop out into the
Yep.
parking lot and went back. And we
Yep.
actually found the arrow maybe only 50 or 60 yards from where he was originally shot, but he had carried it through that whole big loop and dumped it back off
Okay.
there. And we tracked him for a good chunk of ways. I mean, I'm going to say we probably tracked him 700-800 yards before we knew that we weren't ever going to recover him. You know, we weren't going to find him. But it was just, you know, the kid telling me the story, and I can only imagine what those people were thinking walking their dog and they see this bear come out, and you know, obviously he was still holding the arrow, which had a luminoc on it when he walked by him. Like all the things as a hunter you don't, especially a bow hunter, you don't want to have happen.
You don't want to have happen. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Did you get a sense of where he was hit? Did he?
You know, the arrow didn't have a ton of penetration on it, so you know, I've learned to not trust the hunter too much.
Yeah,
He said it made a big noise when it hit it, right? And
Oh,
there
yeah.
wasn't a ton of
Yeah.
penetration on it, so I'm guessing, you know, it was more forward, up into the shoulder
Yep.
blade. You
Yep,
know, he
probably so.
shed it, and there wasn't a lot of sign on the arrow that made me think that there was going to be anything wrong with that bear. You know, but
Yeah.
it was a successful track in the sense that I don't think the kid would have ever found the arrow.
Yeah.
Because when that bear went down the parking lot, it didn't go back into the woods for a couple hundred yards. And to assume that it would have done a loop and came right back to where it was, I mean, it crossed the same path that it had been shot on, and it shed the arrow 50 yards down that way. Like he would have never even looked that way. He would have
Kept
been
going.
the other way. So just finding the arrow and seeing how little penetration it was a victory for him.
That's awesome.
And then if you're ready, I'll tell you the big bear one, I guess. Right?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, lay it on me, man. In this one, you have a video on YouTube.
This one we do have a video on YouTube.
Yeah,
Edited
on YouTube.
down a touch, but yeah, a video on YouTube for sure. Yeah,
let's hear this one. This is a fun one.
Yeah, so I'm probably 120 miles from New York City, straight down the river, right? So we get people that have second homes, you know, in our general area and got 25, 30 acres, an old farmhouse. And that's and that's a lot of our people that call us, right? And it's great, right? Good people, get to meet some new folks all the time. In this scenario, that's what it was. It was a father, an uncle, and two cousins, right? The son and his cousin, and they come up every weekend and hunt. And he had shot a bear first thing in the morning, out deer hunting. God, I'm trying to remember the date. It felt like it was later October. Again, it was right in that time frame that all four of those bear were covered, but right in that late October time frame. And he had shot, you know, and he was wide-eyed when I met him and telling me that it was a big bear. He's like, a really big bear. And he got a pass through. They had an arrow. It had good blood on it, and shooting a small single bevel fixed blade, right? And it was just really undersized.
October 18th.
October 18th. Was it that early?
That's when you started. Yep. What's that?
Was it October 18th? That was that early?
Yep. Yeah. So he probably shot it a couple of days before, but anyway.
Yeah. God, that's early in the year. Then sorry, I thought it was later than that. But he so shooting a really small fixed blade, big bear, right? Probably a little undersized for what he'd done, but he'd shot it. calls the cavalry, and his dad said, okay, this is a big bear. Let's leave him alone for a bit, and we'll go back out in a couple hours. So I'm going to say 10, 11 o'clock, they go out to try to track this bear, and they have in their property. And again, it was really, really dry. Like we talked about, they have a small swamp. I mean, I'm going to say the whole thing is under 15 acres, the swamp, right? Maybe 10 acres, even, right? High cattails, 10-foot tall cattails normally would have water in some spots. You probably would get your ankles wet if you tried to walk through it, but dried up because of how dry it was. Well, they track to the swamp, and they go into the swamp a little bit, but the cattails, they're fishing around, and I don't know if they just got uneasy about going in and wanted somebody else to come, or if they just really did lose it, because they had then come back out of the swamp and just started circling the swamp and found one more piece of blood outside the swamp. And then they called me. And I said, okay, well, we'll come again. You shot him at 7 o'clock. Let's wait until later in the afternoon, just before dark. We still got sun, he'll have 10 hours on him at that point, right? We'll try it then. So I set Winston down and like a rocket, right straight into that tall, dried up swale grass, whatever you want to call it, right?
Yeah.
We immediately get in there 75 yards, and there's two big bloody beds. I mean, big beds, bigger than my arms around, beds full of blood. And I'm yelling to them, like, he was in here, right? Like, you guys probably bumped him out of here when you stuck your head in here, but he was in here. And now we're hands and knees, and we ultimately come out of the swamp, and they're standing where they had that other piece of blood. And I'm like, okay, we got to there, and they're like, this is the last drop of blood we had. I said, okay. And I've been carrying a gun, and I said, man, it is thick in there. I was like, hang on this, and we're going to go back, right? Just hang on, right? Let's go. And the dog edges the edge of the swamp for 100, 125 yards, and then boom, hard right back into the swamp. We go in 100 yards, another bed full of blood. Get going again, another bed full of blood, another bed full of blood, right? Like man, this is a lot of blood for a tracker, right? Like, normally we hear hunters say lots of blood, but this is lots of blood.
Yeah.
And then, kind of like snapping pictures as I go, just so I can show the hunter, because I wasn't going to drag him back in there. I'm marking things off on the GPS. So we're going through it a little slower than the dog wants to go. Like he wants to go. So ultimately, I think the video says, like, the unedited part of the video says like 25 minutes or something like that in the swamp.
Yeah.
Right. And the whole time there's confirmation, right? Like, if we lose them for a minute, then there's a little speck of blood on a piece of tame grass, and we see him again. We finally come to the last 3 beds right in a row. And one of those beds, you can tell he's used that bed for years, right? It's just dried up, old, matted hair, dead gray. There's piles of bear crap right at the end of it, right? Like where he craps, and he just and it's just mud. It's just buried right down, and like, it's a nice place for him. It was probably just up out of the water level when there was water, just up on a hump there. And when we got there, I'm like, man, there's some blood in here. And there wasn't a lot of blood in that final bed. I actually remember pulling out some peroxide and spraying it on a stick and seeing it bubble white. And I'm like, yep, that's blood. And I'm like, he's clotted up at this point, right? And while I'm there, I can hear rustling at the end of the swamp, and I can hear him finally start talking. I'm yelling to the hunters. I'm like, are you guys, is that you? Yeah, we came all the way around to the end of the swamp. Yep. And I kind of let Winston out just a little bit, just an extra 15 feet with the leash to see which direction he's going to go. And I'm yelling to the hunters. I'm like, it looks like we're headed back toward the hardwoods. Like, I'm right on the edge of the swamp. Can you hear me? They're like, yep. I'm like, all right, come around. I was like, there's a bunch of beds here I can show you. And at this point, I'm like, I'm at least going to show them the beds so they don't think I'm full of crap.
Right.
We've seen all this stuff. So I'm kind of holding Winston back, waiting for them to come. And I give him just a couple extra feet, and he goes hot, right? Starts, he's wanting to go, and he's pulling, and I'm like, uh-oh. Like that means he's either dead really close by. And that's really what I thought it was at this point, because he didn't open up until I
Yeah.
gave him just that couple extra feet.
Yeah.
So I'm like, man, maybe he's dead right here, and I'm just not letting him, because that's the only time he makes noise, is he's
Yep.
dead close by, or I'm holding him back on a live animal. And then I start to crawl out with him, and we get to the open hardwoods, and I just look and scan, and I don't see anything, and he's at the end of the leash barking his head off, and I'm yelling. I go over to the hunter. I'm like, he's alive. He's out in front of us here. I don't think he's out in front of us more than 15 minutes, but he's alive out here somewhere. I'm like, come on,
Mhm.
come on. And I turn my head back and I look, and it just caught a glimpse of him, a big bear walking away from me 200 yards out in front of me, slow walking away from me. So now I'm yelling back. You can hear me in the video. I've got him. Bring the gun. Somebody bring me a gun. Give me the gun. Like,
Yeah.
I am like, just, the
Oh, my
adrenaline's
God.
rushing. And
Oh,
so
yeah.
dad has the gun. He runs over to me. He hands me the gun. And I'm like, hand him the dog. I'm like, just hang on, right? Like, don't let him loose. Do not let go of this leash. And I start running through the woods. And you can see in the GoPro, it looks like a video game almost.
Yep.
Like I'm going through the woods. And I'm gaining on him. And he kind of turns and looks at me one time, and then picks up speed a little bit. And I stop and I let a shot loose, and I think it hit him in the butt. And he kind of just flinched just a bit. And then kind of get my stuff back together and start running again. And then he goes up a tree. So now I'm like, okay, everybody come. He's up a tree. It's a pretty tall tree. And I'm like, man, I can't let him go all the way up the top. Then we're going to be in trouble. And he got into a V of a tree, and I'm 25 yards, 30 yards from the tree. And I just shot through the V, and he dropped right there. And that was it. It was over. But
Oh,
that bear was dressed 307 pounds. So probably 370s or something like that. High 350s anyways on the hoof. And seeing him walk away from me or running away from me in open hardwoods like that, it didn't dawn on me until we got back in the truck about how close we actually probably were to that bear when we were crawling around in there.
Oh, I got goosebumps. That creeps me out, man.
Yeah. I was like, I will not do that ever again. Right. I will not give up my gun just because it was uncomfortable for me to walk
God.
around. We get to dispatch, and,
Yeah.
In 100 and I don't even know what number we're at, but 150 recovery somewhere is in that General Bar Park. I've probably dispatched 15 to 17 animals would be my guess. Right. And most of those are from 3 feet away.
Yeah.
Their misery. Right. Like,
Yeah.
I can count on 3 or 4 instances where they've been like this, where we were running them down. The dog jumped them up, and they still had enough life that we had to run them down a bit before we had to dispatch them. But the majority of those 17 or 15, whatever it is, have been super close. The deer couldn't get out of its bed. We're just putting it out of its misery at that point. And some of those have been deer that people know that our license allows us to dispatch. And they shot a deer. They've come up to it at night. They can't shoot it. And they ask if we could come out and dispatch, right? And I'll call my local in-con guy, and he's like, yeah, your license, you can do it. Sure. Put it out of its, right? Like, go ahead and do it. And we'll come in, and generally we'll bring the dog just as training even for that, right? But that isn't very often either. I make it sound like that's something that happens, but I can 2 times, maybe 3 times in 400 some tracks that I've ever dispatched a deer that was only dispatched because he was just going to suffer through the night if I don't.
Oh yeah. Well, I wish we had tracker dispatch in Michigan, but we don't. I could have had I could have used it this year. I'll just leave it at that.
I think between the bear, I think we dispatched, it may have been 4 this year, which is a little higher than normal. At least 3. Another video on our YouTube page, that bear one is on there, and another one was another really good buck where kid called me, shot a deer. He said he dropped like a sack of potatoes. I'm like, oh great, this can be high spine, right? Like, tracked like a sack of potatoes with a gun, but was only like 200 yards. just before dark, and then his dad got out of his tree stand and started coming into him, and the deer stood up and took off. And the dad swore that he went north, right? Went straight away north. When I set the dog down, dog gets to like where the deer had jumped and almost 180 degrees, 125 degrees, and starts heading this way, right? And I'm like, what the hell? Like he saw it, like, I got to believe his eyes. So I'm forcing him back. We restart, and I force him up the hill. I'm like, okay, whereabouts do you think he was when he went up the hill? Like, we'll try to cut his track. And we spent 45 minutes messing around. And finally I said to the dad, I said, can you go back to where your stand was and walk in like you were and tell me where you stood when you saw the deer? And when he stood on this roadway and where the deer actually, because we had blood where it had fallen down, I'm looking, I'm like, there ain't no way which direction this thing went at dark, right? Like,
right.
So if there was another deer out there, right? And I'm like, at this point, we have to trust the dog, right?
Right.
I said, that's the only thing we can do. So we turned and went back that way, and boom, he goes hot. I mean, we weren't from where that deer was shot and he fell into his bed. We were under 250 yards when we jumped him at 16 hours later. Like he had just moved that little bit and laid down. He was shot super high, but it took 300 wind, took both front shoulders. And I'm guessing very high in the lungs and both shoulders. And he just couldn't use either leg.
Yeah.
And he was still alive. And we're going and jumped him. And I didn't see him. The kid saw him. And again, in New York, the hunter can carry the weapon of season.
Yep.
Gun season, right? So he had a gun, he had a rifle, him and his dad both. And deer's trying to get himself out there, and they shoot again. And I can then still see the deer moving after they shot. And I'm like, okay, like pause, like time out, right? Like back up. We hit a posted sign as well. So I was like, that actually was perfect. Like, let's give him a couple minutes here, right? He only went 250 yards in 12 hours. He isn't going to run away from us at this point.
Right.
Let's just give him some time. You guys figure out property, right? I've got some more calls I can make. I went to the truck and sat, and they went and got permission. And I think it was like an hour and a half later, we went back down there and set the dog on him. And we were at where, when he got up that time, he had gone 50, 60 yards, and the dad had taken a shot and hit him really low. There's just piles of white hair all over the place.
Oh yeah.
We see that. And then we find where the deer had bedded after he was shot, maybe another 75 yards next to this creek. There was a little bit of blood, and Winston goes hot, and he's running. In the video, you can kind of see he's running behind him, and the deer stand is trying to get away, but not very fast, walking. And he got to a creek, and again, in the video, I kind of like zoom in on him quickly, you just get a glimpse of him in the video, and then pull up the gun, and both me and the hunter shoot him within a couple minutes, and he collapsed there. Another really good deer for our area, 135-inch 10-pointer, right? Like, and we were super excited about it. And I sounded like I was the kid that, that it was my deer out there. I'm hooting and hollering, and just as excited as he was. But
I'm not being rude, Dave, or maybe I am, but I'm looking at your YouTube page right now. I see your bear track, and I'm just looking for that other track. But
the other one, you can see the deer. He's like laying in a stream. Like after we shot him, he kind of fell in the stream onto his hocks, and I was so excited. I let the dog loose, and the dog's over there like trying to jump on him, and he still had a little bit left in him, but Winston didn't care. Winston.
Those little snots are so tenacious.
I think half the time when he tugs on him, he just wants him to stand up and run away so that he can chase him. I don't think he cares.
That could be. That's funny. But that bear track, guys, if you want to look, if I remember, which it's anybody's guess whether I will or not, in the post description, I'll put I'll link that the bear track video that you talked about, that 300-pounder, because I got to tell you, I've seen the video. You called me when you asked for me to take a look at it and stuff, and it was cool. But I got to tell you, it's creepy. My grandfather had a rule. He says, "I do not hunt anything that can hunt you back."
Right.
Talking about
black bears are generally like, they're pretty skittish. If they get in suburbia, they get a little more just like deer,
Grazing.
right? Like they're not so bad about it. But that bear was wounded enough that he didn't want to get out of that bed. He certainly could have held his ground.
Where was he hit first time?
It was a really good shot. I mean, really good. I think maybe in the end of the video, I don't know if I put it there, but I mean, back of bear. We talk about middle more, right? Like
Yeah.
the anatomy
Yeah.
the anatomy guy, right?
I was
Like
going to ask you. Yeah.
my new favorite, like splurging on anatomy of animals. The anatomy hunter guy is like,
Yeah.
he's
Brian
going to
Johnson.
blow up in my opinion, right? Like he's just now getting Facebook and stuff like that
Yeah.
rolling, but some
He
of the
is.
content he puts out, like trackers are just going to eat it up. But yeah, so more middle. He shot it like it was a deer and was forward toward his shoulder, and it was a touch low. But when I say, I mean, if it was a deer, he was within an inch and a half of it being perfect, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So, on a bear, my anatomy skills aren't quite as what they are as a deer. Not that they're, anything impressive on a deer, but I would have assumed bottom of lungs. But again, shooting a very, very small single bevel fixed blade, like 150 grains single bevel. It just was not. It wasn't a big enough hole for that caliber of animal, right? And he wasn't. I'm not knocking him, right? Like he was out there to shoot a 160-pound deer, not a 360-pound bear.
Right.
It just happened to come through. So I think if the mechanical fixed blade stuff, right? That single bevel zipped through it. He had an arrow. We had an arrow to look at, for sure. Put 2 holes in it. Mechanical, I don't know if it would have got all the way through, but it would have made a bigger hole on the front side. Right? Maybe it done a little more damage. I don't know, but maybe it would have caught that shoulder blade too and only got
who knows
4 inches of penetration, right? I mean, he definitely got penetration. He zipped it all the way through an animal that size. Like it did what it was supposed to. It just was not a big cut. And we see, I don't know about you guys out there. I mean, the hunting public stuff and ranch fairy stuff, like a lot of guys shooting heavier setups, which is great. I think there's a lot of science behind it. It makes complete sense to me. But those single bevels, they just don't necessarily keep a big hole, in my opinion, right? Like they're made to to twist as they hit bone and kind of go through it. But I think if they just hit regular flesh, they kind of come through and it's just a smaller slice. Dead is dead, right?
Right.
Just not a lot of blood trail out of some of them for sure.
Yeah, well, you're right. He probably, if they went to rummaged around in there when they did, and he had another, you tracked him the next morning, whatever, probably been dead in that first stuff right inside that swamp.
Yeah, if they hadn't gone, I mean, they did the right thing. I mean, they waited 3-4 hours before they ever went and looked, and he felt like it was a good shot, and he had a fully coated arrow, right? So but they never saw the first bed. Even they never even made it to that first bed. If they would have seen that first bed, I don't know that they would have called me. They would have been like, "Oh yeah, this thing is destroyed," right? Like if they could have got to that first bed. They're right though. Once they bumped him out of there and he came outside of the swamp the first time, he didn't put much sign down, and a couple drops over a couple 100 yards until he went back into the swamp and laid down. And I'm assuming when he laid down, it just opened that hole up. It opened, and he was dropping blood more when he was laying down than he was when he was standing up. But that one I'll remember for a long time for sure. And I appreciate
big bear.
Yeah, I appreciate you letting me bounce it off you. I struggled with the video part of it. Like it was really exciting to me. It's really exciting as a hunter, the whole scenario, right? But ultimately, we have to be careful. I don't know who I heard this from. It was another tracker on a podcast somewhere. It's one of the 8 million that I've heard. Our future probably isn't dictated by us. There's a lot more non-hunters than there are hunters.
What an interesting, I've not heard somebody say that, but that's certainly plausible. If we are not mindful about the things that we're putting on social media, and we're not mindful about the way we engage with hunters and other people in the real world, our future is not dictated by us. Wow.
Certainly we can, you know,
Influence it.
give ourselves an argument, right? But if it came to a vote, there's more
Yeah.
non-hunters than there are hunters in this country, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we represent a big chunk, but there's certainly more non-hunters than there are hunters. And then when you get into politics, the ratio probably becomes even
Yeah.
more skewed.
More unfavorable, we'll say.
Right. Right. So I don't
Wow.
remember where I heard that from, but it hit home for me. Right. And, you know, that I appreciate you letting me bounce that off you, whether I should put it. And I did. The video is edited down some, right? Like
Well, appropriately so, you know,
yeah.
for the reasons we were just talking about and in time, you know.
Yeah.
But no, I was thrilled to death that you called me, and I got to sharing that with you a little bit early, a little sneak peek, you know. So I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun, man.
Yeah.
Cool.
It was definitely, and to have it on GoPro as well, right? Like I try to run GoPro a lot of times, but you know how it is, right? It's just another thing. And I'm a minimalist on tracks. Like, I don't have a big tactical vest. I wear like a bird orange, you know, it's got a couple pockets in it. I got some toilet paper, some hydrogen peroxide.
Yeah.
If I'm tracking at night, I bring some glow sticks or something. But other than that, I'm pretty light on what I carry. So the GoPro, sometimes I'm like, well, you know.
Well, I wanted to this year, you know. I was like, man, I'm gonna get more. I just always forgot, and then like you, when I did remember, I'm like, oh crap, I don't have it ready. The battery, where's my SD card? The battery's dead.
Yep.
Like, oh shit, I got a harness up, you know, and it's you know, so I'm like, hell with it.
And
you know, I wish I would have, but
a couple times I had it on me, and we had some cool tracks, and I get to the end of it, and the thing had stopped. Like it either was full or the battery, like or I hit it when I was adjusting it or something. Like there was a couple of them that I was like, man, that's going to be really cool video, and there was just nothing there. So that's
the other thing, you know, you never know what a track is going to be, and you know, the cards fill up so fast, the battery goes dead, and I'm not going to stop a track to fart around to change the battery on a GoPro, or you know, I'm not doing any of that. So I didn't get any. I'll try to get some this coming year. We'll see, you know.
Yeah, it's another thing, right? I don't have, I think maybe 2 other tracks that I caught on video that I haven't done any editing or anything on or put up yet. And they're both pretty ho-hum. They're like, we set the dog down, we go 300 yards and there's a dead deer, right? Like,
but those are fun to watch and to get them out there, man. I mean, you and Matt do really good. Matt Davis from Broken Arrow. You guys put good stuff out there. I mean,
it's fun for me.
Editing, I don't have the patience for a quality edit. I mean, I can chop some stuff up using the free software, you know, that I downloaded. But you know, I wish I was better at it, and I wish I had the patience to be better at it, you know. But because I like that stuff. But
I think if I did, I would probably be better off doing 5 or 6 of them at a time, like after the season. Because I have to keep going back. Like, how do you cut? How do you bring the volume? Right? And then I do it.
Remember for everyone you do.
And 2 weeks later, I try to do another video, and I'm like, I know it's over here somewhere. And
that's a great point. Yeah, because I'm the same way. Every time I'm like, I'm getting okay. I've done quite a few here lately, just small things. I'm getting a little better with the free software that I'm using, but and it does okay for it. You know, I'm not trying to get an Emmy for production, you know, video production or something, but you know, if I could, I'd pay somebody to do it, but I'm too cheap to do that.
It does make it interesting when you watch other people's stuff. You're like, ooh, how did he do that? Right? Like, how did he fade in and out of that? Or, you know,
that's fun. That's fun. Well, cool, man. What's anything fun and exciting in the future, man? You doing any shows or anything?
So it's kind of odd, right? Like being that this is where it all started, right? Like right here in my backyard with John. And I'm a member of the original deer search, organization that kind of started most of this stuff. We
Yeah.
don't really have much going on in this area. We have some hunter shows. There's one that down in Hamburg, PA, a Cabela's, huge Cabela's that they have every year that's huge in the Northeast people go to. And there's 100 outfitters and a couple trackers will go down, and just kind of educating stuff there. I'm doing my local rod and gun club. I'm
Okay.
going to go and talk about some shot placement stuff for the bow course. And for the gun course, I think it's going to be more, I think I'm going to lay a practice track the day before and just show those same guys, let the dog work a practice track and just kind of show them how a dog works. And
little demo. That's awesome. I've done that before. Yeah. Little tracking demo.
Yeah. I may ask you at some point to steal a little bit of your PowerPoint, the PowerPoint that you put on there one time when you were on Facebook and did like
I can send it to you. I got your email. I'll just send it to you.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm really excited about the bow course. That's the end of April. Probably some younger kids in there and just talking about shot placement stuff. And I think some of the anatomy hunter guy, like I could see myself trying to steal a couple of his clips and, he does such a good job of diagramming. And
I'm telling you, he's the only source I will use when it comes to anatomy. And when I did a local hunter thing, I let my friend Anthony, who works, at least part-time at the local archery shop, do a shot placement segment. He asked if he could. I'm like, well, absolutely. And the images he used, I looked at him and I go, that's Brian Johnson's stuff, isn't it? He said, yeah, it is. I'm like, I knew it. And it's great stuff. I'm going to get some of his stuff. We're going to, in fact, I was texting him. He texted just before we got on here. We're going to have him back on the ABTA Tuesday Night Lives. We'll have him back to go out through some stuff. And, he's going to, looks like he's going to come to Michigan and get on some tracks with us and
awesome.
Probably go to Florida and get on some tracks with Kenny and do some hog hunting down there with Kenny. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I think it's going to be really neat. I'm looking forward to having him. And then I want to do everything I can to help him get one of his projects out, that shot placement thing that he talked about on that live stream, because that is so good. And shot placement is huge. And it's funny because I was talking to somebody, it might've been Kenny, talking about, he's using it to show where you should shoot the deer and where you need to shoot the deer based on every angle and all this. Trackers, we use it for that too, but probably more we're showing why your deer's not dead when you hit here, why you shouldn't take this angle because look at this big armor plate of bone here. We're using this to why not to, and he's using it as to where to, although we are too. But it's just, to me, that's just for what we're doing. The anatomy and is so critically important. It's critically important for everybody, but to be able to just use it and speak to it in a way that really accurately depicts the truth, not the cartoon drawings that you see in every other bow hunting magazine or whatever, but just what really is going on is so important. And somehow, some way, I'm going to end up with a Brian Johnson model on shot placement so I can use it. And I hope it's the one that I can help him by him going on some tracks with us and other Michigan trackers, help him develop, because it's so impactful. It's so needed, I think.
I was snapping pictures of my computer screen, like when you guys had him on the last time, and showing like, hey, this is a real deer. I molded this. My son shot this deer. Here's the real deer. And you can see, and he lays that. He goes to the next section where he pulls the lungs out, and the liver was still there. Right?
Yeah.
Rewinding it, and just so I could take a picture of him just getting the lungs out, and still got a picture of the lungs and where that liver lays and that angle that it actually at, right? Not this vertical thing that just that you see it. Wraps in a diaphragm. And oh, by the way, the diaphragm,
it moves with as a deer breeze, and just all of these things that can start to maybe put together some of the missing pieces of the puzzle. How come he shot a deer right here and it lived, and he shot a deer right there and we couldn't find it? Well, because the diaphragm was in a different position, or whatever. It's just, that's the kind of fascinating stuff that I just love. I'm just totally, I'm a nerd about it. All of the scientific stuff that Kenny got into a little bit, on Tuesday, and even more. I don't know why I like it. I just absolutely love that stuff.
There's enough trackers now, right? Like it's probably the trackers are what's going to nerd out about some of the stuff like you, Kenny, were talking about, right? Like the normal, like even just dog people, right? Well, I guess like the human trackers and people that work with, like, maybe interesting, right? But there's enough trackers that are just like want to nerd out on that stuff. That it's a pretty big audience nowadays. It's not like it's just a couple hundred trackers across across a couple
and
states.
It's growing. It's growing. As social media becomes more and more prevalent. I mean, it's hard to fathom it becoming more prevalent than what it is, but whether it is or not, I don't know. But it's ubiquitous, man. It's everywhere. Everybody has access to it at an instant. They're always carrying it in their hands or in their pocket, or it's never more than 2 feet away from them. It seems,
and I think that's probably the next level for me at some point. I don't think I'm ready yet, but at some point, like, there's sometimes you find a deer and you're just like, oh, there's your deer. It's like, it's not that first deer you found anymore, oh, wow, that was really cool, right? Like, we got there was gut on the arrow. I knew the deer was going to be dead up here, right? We walked to it, we found it. Congratulations, here's your deer. Let's move on, right? So not everyone drives you the same way, but like listening to Gary Huber the other day on Matt and Lindsay.
Matt Lindsay's, I was going to bring that up.
Listening to him talk about like how much he gets out of training the next group of trackers, right? Like him being a mentor. He's got a different, young group every year, 1 or 2 people that are trying to get into it, and he's mentoring them and bringing them out on tracks and stuff. I could see that like starting to pique my interest at some point. Right now, I'm selfish. I just want to find all the deer myself, but at some point, I could see it going to that.
It's a lot of fun, and that's I love it. That's why part of the I love helping the new guys. I loved it when people helped me, and although it's weird for me going into my 4th year, and some of my mentors weren't much more than 4 years in when I considered them my mentors, and it's weird now that I'm going into year 4 with nearly 200 tracks under my belt with my dog. Now, and I have a friend that tracks more than that in one season, but for the average Joe,
so people don't get to see 200 tracks in life, right?
It's
2% of the population of even hunters. 2%.
Oh yeah. But I really enjoy working with the first timers. I just the people who are trying to learn, and I always qualify stuff that I tell them, but as where I'm at in my tracking trajectory and stuff. But it's so fun, and that's why this weekend, Saturday, I've invited three of my friends who are new tracking. They're not in the network yet, and whether they will be or not, time will tell. But I love helping them. We're great friends. They're great. They got great dogs, and there's 2 of them are close to me. So, and I don't have anybody else really by me in the southeast corner, especially when you go southeast. I got nobody down there, man. So that's in the network. So I'm really glad to have Nick and Alan coming on. So they're people that I trust and know are serious about it, putting in the work. And I've worked with them a little bit. We've trained together, so I know, that when I say, hey, you know what, call Alan or call Nick. It's somebody that I know is that I can trust and are just, first of all, they're very, very good people. Second of all, they're serious trackers who are just getting started and just need time, but they're doing everything they should be doing right now,
And it's
so nice. I just enjoy that.
Yeah, it's nice. Like I think in our general area, I probably have the most tracks under my belt within, I don't know, maybe I'm going to say 100 miles, right? There's
Yeah,
definitely, there's guys that are part of that old deer search that got more than me for sure. But at this point, right, there's 4 or 5 guys within 50 miles, and it's nice to be like, hey, what do you think, right? Like being the guy that's receiving those calls or questions, like,
yeah,
hey, what do you think about this arrow? Like, would you go on this? You know, and we're all like just doing it together, right? And I
yeah, yeah,
there's guys that got less tracks than me that I'm bouncing ideas off of. I'm like, man, have you ever seen this? Like, you know,
yeah, yeah,
there's 4 of us that are probably sending 10 texts a day just
yeah,
about the stuff that we're running into, you know? So
yeah.
it's certainly a community for sure.
And to me, that's what it should be, you know. And there's always a guy that thinks he owns it, or doesn't thinks you're peeing on his tree and doesn't wants to be guarded. But I'm not that guy, and and I like sharing, and I'm receptive to input from anybody, you know.
I'm
So
I'm
I'm
very lucky because it's a passion of mine and I love doing it and I want to like keep my little area here, you know, under protection. Like I want them to
yeah,
be my people, you know. And I'm lucky, I think, because a you can't charge in New York, right?
yeah,
It's donation only, right? So there's
yep,
nobody out there doing it for anything other than the love of doing it. You know what I mean?
right,
Like if somebody gets
right.
into it because they think they're gonna, even in tips, that you're gonna make them, you know, thousands of dollars a year. Like you're not, right?
Yeah,
You
it's not gonna put you in a new tax bracket.
right. So it keeps a lot of the people that I don't want to say a lot of the people because I don't believe that's true, but the 1 or 2 people that would come in and be like, "Oh,
Yeah,
I'm going to go make some money out of this. I've got a dog. I can teach him to do this." Right? Like he
yeah,
found my deer once. Right? Like I'm
yeah,
going to
yeah,
go
yeah,
get
yeah.
a $50 license and I'm going to advertise $350 to show up. Right?
Yeah.
Because that's not allowed here. I think it keeps our numbers fairly small in New York State. It's kind of weird, right? We're one of the older states with it. So some of those original guys are now not taking many tracks.
Yeah.
And there's this next wave starting to come up of, trackers, but it's not a massive number of trackers in New York State, for the
Right.
size. And
Right.
the other big D word as well, like drones not
Oh, yeah.
being legal here as well. I think that cuts down on numbers
Yep.
as well. I think if we made drones legal, it probably opens the door to some more folks coming in and getting involved, which another show, another episode.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we've talked about. I've had Darren Miner on and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So,
Yeah, I listened to
um,
Darren.
yeah, yeah, in the drone thing, and they're not legal in Michigan either. And if they do become legal, they do. If they, I'm okay. I kind of hope they don't. Not
I'm
anytime
so
soon, but if they do, that's okay.
I'm so
It's just it's another it's another method to help hunters, and when done credibly for the right reasons, who am I? If I'm doing it to help hunters, and that's a tool to help hunters,
legal is legal, right? That's kind of
legal's
what
legal. Yeah.
I
So
hope it doesn't come here. I really do hope.
yeah,
Do I think it's going to be stopped? Probably not. But I just hope
it
it don't.
won't. I
And
mean, in time.
there's a guy, a local guy, not too local, 40, 50 miles up north, that's doing some great work finding lost pets with
Oh
them.
yeah, yeah,
It's like it's a decent business for him. He's every day he's posting, "Oh, be on the look. I can't go today to look for this dog, but everybody be, he's got 5,000 followers, and he, if you got a lost
yep,
dog, he'll post it on the page, and people got their
yep,
eyes open for it, and then he goes, and if he can help, he helps, and I'm sure he charges for it, and it's great. I'm sure he's doing it by the rules and by the book, but
yeah,
if it never becomes legal for deer searching, it wouldn't hurt my feelings here in New York. But at the same time, I understand the other side
yeah,
of the coin.
yep. Yeah, we have in fact three of my mentors in my network have a little group that they all have the high speed, high caliber thermal drones, and that's exactly what they do. You know, they call themselves Michigan Drone Dogs, and listeners, check them out, follow them, Michigan Drone Dog, and they do a lot of cool stuff. Pet, lost pets, lost livestock, deer herd analysis. They're doing some really neat things. And in fact, my buddy Daryl just texted me yesterday, "Hey man, I just found this dog." And we talk all the time, and it's just really neat. I like the way they're doing it. And it's like I always say, it's three guys doing the right things for the right reasons.
Yeah, I think that's what scares people, right? Is how easy it could be the wrong thing, right? And that's
there's zero question about it.
Yeah.
Is it easier to violate with a drone than it is with a dog? Yeah, no, it is. Will people do violate with dogs? Yeah, probably. Will they with drones? Yes.
Sure. Yeah.
Will it be problematic? Probably not.
Right. Yeah. I mean, to be the scenario that I could see the most is these big outfitters that charging $6,000-7,000 for a 3 or 4 day hunt, right? Midwest, big, especially, the guides are living off tips, basically, right? They get a salary, but they're living off tips.
Yeah.
And these guys all have dog trackers on call for when something doesn't go right? They come in and they're charging out there. But I mean, I can't imagine being an operator of an outfit like that and saying, "Oh, I can make the investment." Like we have to call a dog tracker 10 times a year. You know what I mean? Maybe it's 5 times a year, but that dog tracker charges $300-400. Man, if I get a $15,000 drone, it's paid off in 2 or 3 years. Now the outfitters got it. You're like, okay, you're trying to people in tree stands that have deer close by, right? I could see it being tough for me to be like, man, let's just take a peek over here.
Yeah, I suppose so.
But it's just crazy technology. There's a lot of stuff coming at it. I'm getting way off subject here, but my son's hockey team, one of the fathers is a federal guy, and that's what he's in charge of, is like building the next set of scenarios on regulating drones, period, in the country, right? Like he's on this big task force, and they can monitor drones much more than I ever thought, right? Just based on frequency, they can overtake them. They know which drone is registered to which person, right? If you're doing it right, like in registering it in the beginning, right? Like, but it's just like guns. Like the things that are scary are ghost versions of them, right? People buying parts, building their own, and then there's the tracking of something like that would be much more difficult. But I had a couple hour conversation with him this past weekend at hockey tournament, and it's more of that anatomy stuff, right? Like how do you go before your head explodes, and can you tell me it again next week so that I can try to remember it?
Yeah, that's good stuff. So a couple things. First off, from Albany, New York to me is only 9 hours and 49 minutes. So you need to be.
Michigan are you in?
Southern part, Jackson. Just probably. I'm just due west of Detroit, 80 miles.
So if we'd have done this a couple of years ago, my career was. A lot of my success of my job was made because of the state of Michigan. I traveled to the state of Michigan in Lansing to do work every other week for almost 4 years. I would either fly into Grand Rapids or into Detroit and drive down. I spent a lot of time in Michigan in that general area between Grand Rapids, Lansing, and up to Detroit. It's a chunk of 4 years there.
Well, you need to June 28th come to the present, or you need to go to the one in Pennsylvania. I need to. So it's 9 hours and 45 minutes if you go through Canada.
Yeah.
If you go under Canada, it's about 11 hours and 14 minutes.
I was halfway there this past weekend. My son had a hockey tournament in Niagara Falls. That was 4.5 hours. So I was halfway there. Where's the one in PA?
Windber, PA. It's Western PA.
Okay, that would be out there a little bit then.
Yeah, it'd be a little haul for you, but you should do it. I was in
What's the
Lancaster
date?
last August.
What's the date of that PA one?
May 30, that weekend, that Friday, Saturday, Sunday, May 30th. That's a seminar and testing event, but
Yeah. The only one I've ever been to was they had Track Fest, which is a UBT thing.
Yep.
In Bern, New York, which is
Mhm.
15 miles from where I lived at the time, because John was kind of getting up there in age. I think they kind of did it as an homage, and that's where I got it. That's where I bought. I had John's book. I hadn't seen a tracking dog work at that time. I had a Weimaraner, had a bum leg because he had broke it when he was young, and
Yep.
heard about this and just heard this Track Fest. I paid some money, went up, and I still remember like them going around the room and saying like, okay, who are you? How many tracks? Blah, 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 what kind of dog? And me standing up going, I've never tracked. I have a Weimaraner who's like 8 years old, and I'd like to potentially get into it. And I could imagine now that I know what I know, I could imagine.
What you got? Oh boy, here we go.
And you're talking about like the godfathers of tracking, right? Like Darren Doran and Gary Bless and John Jenney and John, like they're probably like, I'm probably at the time, God, this was, somebody just posted it on Facebook not too long ago, the anniversary of it. So I don't know if it's been 15 years or something maybe. And I'm like, that's me right there. I circled myself in the group. I'm like, that was me. It took me 6-7 years from then to actually go and get a tracking dog and get started. But Track Fest was the only event that I've ever really been to that's 100%.
Yeah, they don't do them anymore, which is a bummer. UBT quit doing them. So
I think the state stuff is kind of picked up, and I think it's great because law is different, right? Like you're in different area. It's a different law. Some people on lead, some people off lead, some people dispatch, some people don't dispatch, some are shotgun only, right? Some are rifle. It's all different stuff, right? The South is certainly different than the North. So it makes sense. UBT for us is still great here because of for me, it's their website. Their Find a Tracker. That's where, like, if people don't know me through Facebook or haven't used me before, it's UBT, right? And there's a spot, Find a Tracker. You put in your zip code, and here's everybody's number, right? It's pretty easy to get to. And then I get a million Facebook posts like, somebody, I need a dog. Who's got a dog, right? And then people just start tagging me and post, and I'm like, well, you're 300 miles away from me, so here, check out.
I did that to you. Remember that? Like, hey,
you tag me in
hey, Dave, there's one guy in Albany. You come back. It's Albany, Texas, dumbass.
I do.
Disregard.
Yes, I did see Albany. I did get super excited, and then I drilled into the guy's profile. I'm like, that's a corn feeder.
I'm like, oh crap! I was excited to help you to get you a track, man.
Listen, if he called me today, I might get in the truck just because I'm itching to go. But
no kidding. The other thing I wanted to mention, you talked about that the podcast with good grief, Gary Huber.
Yeah,
one of the co-founders of Deer Search. So I want to plug it. Lindsay Knutson and Matt. Matt, I'm sorry, your name is Gagnon or something like that. I think. One Track Mind. Go to One Track Mind and check it out. That was a fun listen to him to talk about. I mean, that is kind of like, that is it. That is ground zero for tracking in the United States, and listen to Gary kind of walk through some of that, and it was really fun. Deer Search is still they're holding on to tradition, man. You still got to call and leave a message, and they prefer you do it with a rotary phone.
Yeah. It gave me chills. So I'm a member of Deer Search down there. I pay. You hear Gary talk about it. Like the way they used to run was even donations went back to Deer Search. Like when they say they did it for free, they did it for free. Every dollar that a customer gave you, a hunter gave you, you gave it back to Deer Search. And I think people used to write checks and put it in, like, to Deer Search and put it in an envelope.
Oh yeah.
And at the end of the year, if you were one of the 10 trackers that were in Deer Search down there, you would say that I drove 2,000 miles this year to track. And they would say, okay, we put 30% of all donations toward mileage, and they would divide it up by total mileage,
Yeah.
and you get some small little check back to cover your gas, and that's it. Like, and they ended up having, so they just switched leadership there. The guy that was president for the last, making numbers up, 15 years, I don't know. He was like, okay, like, I got to get out of this. The secretary, like, they're just, they're aging out of it a little bit. So a young kid stepped up down there, Jeremy DeSanti, younger kid, runs a Bavarian. He's got 2 Bavarians. He actually had trouble with his first one, got some sickness, so he had to go get another pup. Very much into the breed line, though, straight from Germany. But anyway, so Jeremy's super into it. Jeremy took over being the president this past year and is trying to, modernize Deer Search, at least the original chapter out of the Hudson Valley. Jeremy's trying to figure out, how can we make it so it's not a voicemail, right? Like, how can we be valuable? And I think we all agree that our value is in education, not because anybody can pick up the phone and find us at this point through a quick Google search, right? Whether you're UBT or your ABT or your long spur, right? Google, right?
Yep.
Facebook, somebody's going to point you in the right direction at some point. So the value is really, how can we keep it alive with enough money that, hey, when we go to a show, we've got banners, right? And we can sit down and talk about it, right? And we can go to hunters safety courses and, do presentations. And so I think that's, Jeremy's got it on the right track there. It was also a little chilling for me to hear Gary talk about his dog being in the Hall of Fame, because Winston is now in the Hall of Fame or is eligible, and we're going through the process of getting it finalized for the Hall of Fame for Deer Search. And the same one that John's got dogs and Gary's got dogs, Winston will be in there. There's Deer Search in all of New York State. I don't know how many dogs there are. It's probably many, but it was just kind of gave me a little chills to hear Gary talk about it. And
that's really cool, man. That is super cool. I thought of you several times, or at least a couple of times, listening to that podcast, because Gary mentioned Bob Yaks. You've talked to me about Bob Yaks, and there were a couple of other things that, oh man, I remember Dave talking about that.
It was funny because that was the podcast I was telling you I was listening to when I was coming back from Niagara Falls for my son's hockey tournament. So I'm like as I'm listening to it, I'm in the Finger Lakes region, which is where Gary's from, and he's talking about 30 miles south of me being down in the Hudson Valley. And then when he talked about moving John up to Bern, New York, and him getting married, that's like 10 miles from my house, right? So I'm just envisioning Gary driving down 90, to get there. And he's talking about it being 6 hours. My wife's like, 6 hours? It wouldn't take that long. I'm like, yeah, you're talking 40 years ago. Like, we have an old 65 Mustang. I'm like, think about bringing that car out here on the highway. How much longer it would have taken us, right? Like, it's not this nice truck that we're in, cruising down the highway miles an hour. I'm like, it probably was 6 hours back then, Just thinking about the dedication that he had to have put into it to get in a car and drive a couple times a year down there to do that type of stuff, and then drag it back to Western New York and get it to spread like that. It was neat to hear.
No, it was really cool to hear. Yeah, Matt and Lindsay are doing a really good job of that podcast, man. And I told Kenny, I said, man, I feel I like what I do. It's a lot of fun. I get to have these conversations, but theirs is really, and that's what Matt does. The production piece is very well done, and I'm just a guy in my basement having some fun. But I like what I'm doing. It's a lot of fun. I think it's great.
We've talked about this before. We've talked about this before. Like, I'm 7 years into this. 5 years ago, I would have paid money for just to hear two people doing what we're doing right now. Right?
Yeah, me too.
I was like, there's got to be more information somewheres, right?
Yeah.
Like,
it's getting out there, man. There's more and more of it. I saw something. I think I saved the post. I got to go back and look at it. There was Deer Track magazine. It's an online magazine. I'm going to go back and look. I hope I saved that book. I'm like, wait a second, what is this? You know,
I'm shocked. I'm shocked at the book. You know that all of us as trackers are told all the time, right? Like customers are like, you need to write a book. You need to write a book. You need to write a book, right? And it hasn't happened. I'm just surprised that short of John's book, there's no real book about like all the tracks that everybody's been on and all those things. Somebody like Bob Yax that's been on 1,200 tracks could write a book, in his sleep about it.
Oh, geez, yeah, yeah. So there's a market for it.
Yes, for sure.
People would read it.
I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be rude, but my battery is running low, and I don't.
No, that's okay, buddy. Actually, yeah, if you want to plug it in, but I think we're kind of there anyway, man. I like to keep. We're at an hour 54 going on 2, so I don't like to exceed 2. It doesn't let me upload them, so
I appreciate you having me on, Matt, and even if it's just for us to BS and a couple people get something out of it, but it gets me one day closer to tracking in October.
Yeah, that's for sure, man. Well, think about it, dude. If you could work it out and you want to come to Michigan, man, it'd be. I know it's a lot for you, but boy, it'd be fun to have you come see Kenny do his thing. It's just one day.
When does your season open? You open in September.
Our archery season proper opens October 1st, but we have youth hunt weekend, and then an early antlerless season in about early mid-September.
You are a little earlier than us, and then you're definitely open later than us. We end usually around December 15th, and then they open back up for just the last couple of years, this holiday hunt between Christmas and New Year's for 3 days with muzzleloader. But you guys,
go
January, right?
Yeah, we go. Our gun season, we call it gun season, right? Is fixed November 15th through the 30th every year, and then it just depends on what the DNR feels like doing. Sometimes we'll roll right into the muzzleloading season, which is really just the second firearm season for us now because they're trying to get our deer. We're just so bursting at the seams with deer. They're trying to get the herd down, and they're just not doing a good job of it. So, but we can hunt into January. Sometimes
you catch me at the right January day, I might pack up and come out and bring a dog and get my Michigan tracking license. You were talking about still tracking in January. I was.
Tracks really, really taper off in January. There's not much tracking going on there. There's
just snow hits.
Well, and sometimes there's not much snow even here, but it's just the hunters are, they've got what they've got, and they're burning out. So there's just not much tracking going on in January occasionally. But yeah, we'll stay in touch, man. Yeah, it'd be awesome. I'd love to, I'd love to have you. So, well, I tell you what, dude, I think we're up against it. I think we're good, and I appreciate you coming on, Dave. You guys, go to D&W Tracking on Facebook. Follow Dave. Subscribe to his YouTube page. Find that bear hunt. It's a fun watch. Trust me, it's a fun watch. You can find this on Tales on Trails Deer Tracking on Facebook and YouTube, and you will find it on all the audio platforms. So, Dave, thanks for coming on, man. Great chat. More of the good, less of the bad. We'll talk to you soon, brother.
Thanks. Appreciate it, man.
You bet, pal.
It's a tracking hound, cool fall morning with dew on the ground. We done found the deer with a tracking hound. We done found the deer with a tracking hound.